Hello and welcome, true art believers. Today, we're going to discuss various ways that you can apply value to your drawing. Now, there's many different ways of applying value, but I'm going to discuss roughly 3 to 4 different strategies on how you can pursue value in your drawings. Now, the last thing we discussed was transitional value, and that is more of a traditional means where you gradually apply your value onto your object. And I'm going to expedite this process just for demonstrative purposes to kind of give you an idea of what I mean. So what we did last time is we built up our value using various graphite pencils and applied heavier pressure onto the paper surface here. And we slowly built up our transitional value to feel more realistic, right? Just like before, right? So I'm gonna try to go quicker than before so you can get an idea, right? We have our highlight, we have our transitional tone, we have our core shadow, and I'm trying my best to express the reflective light. And I'm going to move towards a 6B to really knock it down out of the park. And I'm really not knocking it out of the park. I'm just using this as an example, right? I'd have to spend a little bit more time to kind of dial this in for the viewer to understand. I'm doing a little bit, use this 3/8 here to kind of bridge the gap on some of these tones here. Let's see what kind of pencil this is. I think this is like a B. So these tones are a little bit more like faceted than I want them to be. So I have to kind of adjust these little, like, they're kind of like little value lines that you can kind of see. You can see that it's not as smooth as it should be. And I'm just trying to soften up that transitional tone so it feels a little bit more believable. All right. So one of the ways was this way, which is the one that we kind of talked about last time, which is creating transitional value by layering your pencil tones over and over again to create subsequent layers to create the illusion of depth and space. And I'm being a little reserved with my core shadow. I probably could stand to darken it up a little bit. And the reason why I am being a little reserved is I tend to go a little bit overboard with my tones. And so I have to be a little bit more cautious in that sense. Otherwise, I tend to over apply my tones and it looks rushed. And that's just something that I've kind of trained myself to kind of be aware of. So those are some of the tendencies I tend to kind of go with. So as you can see, you got this core shadow and you got this subtle transitional value. Now, one of the other ways of applying tones is hatching and cross hatching. And what that is quite simply, so hatching are basically lines that are stacked, that are parallel to each other like this, right? And when you apply these tones together, these lines together in a dense fashion, they create the illusion of value. And then there's also cross hatching, right? So cross hatching would be the same thing, but now you have hatching, vertical lines, and then you have cross hatching, which would be horizontal lines. Right? And you can use this hatching and cross hatching to create the illusion of value. So it's the same thing as this, but only your lines are not in one flat fashion, and they're not bound together by one even transitional tone. You're creating your tones with more intent. So you can do the same here. I haven't done hatching with pencil in so long, so I'm going to be a little bit rusty. And for demonstrative purposes, it becomes a little difficult because I'm trying to do it with kind of like haste. I'm doing it expedited. So I'm going to do hatching like this at the moment. We're just going to kind of build these lines up together real quickly. And what I'll probably do, I'll even do something like this. We'll have some lines going right here. Again, I don't go around doing hatching and cross hatching pencil drawings often, so it's not like this is my native drawing habits. So now we have something to build up from. So we have these lines that are vertical in nature, so they're these lines but tilted on its axis. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to make it cross hatching to add a little bit more depth. And I'll make it a little bit more dynamic. We're going to do something like this. So now we have hatching, and we have cross hatching, and I'm going to add another layer right here. So it's going to be like an X. So essentially you're doing a plus sign and an X sign to create your value. And also I'm going to switch to a 4B for added value depth. So I'm going to do a little bit of cross hatching here. Oh boy, this is going to look very bad. I do not do cross hatching as a form of tones, or at least not in this fashion. This feels a little bit odd to me. So it's going to take me a little bit of like a learning curve. You know, as teachers, we're always expected to like be able to do everything proficiently, and to be quite honest with you, like this is a weak chain for me. I'd have to do a couple of these to kind of really understand how I want to apply my tones. So I'm just building up the hatching denser and denser to create the illusion of value. And from afar it looks okay, but all I'm seeing is all the errors that I'm creating. Typical artist, yeah? Just to see all the problems that you're making. So I'm going to switch to a 6B and see how that affects the tones. Again, this is an expedited version, right? I'm just speeding it up so you can understand the concept. So if you're like, this does not look good, I apologize. It's kind of looking okay, but it's not like it's great. It's nothing to me to. I'm not gonna be putting this in my portfolio anytime soon. Again, it takes a little bit of manipulation. Right? So you can kind of see where I'm coming from with regards to using hatching to create the illusion of value, right? So now we have hatching as another tool in our drawing toolbox, right? In our drawing repertoire that we can take out. So whenever I use hatching for like drawing of this kind of order, I typically use it as a secondary element. It's never the main element. I usually combine two kinds of techniques, and I don't treat this as its only method. And this is really, really rough. I'd have to spend some time getting used to drawing and hatching. Now, another way that you can use value is doing value that also is kind of like a hybrid between hatching and transitional tone, where you kind of combine them together and use a third, which would be implementing the cross contour. So imagine if you could draw, if you wrapped a ribbon around your sphere, what would those lines look? So this is going to be like a hybrid between transitional tones and hatching. So what I'm going to do is do the same method for the transitional tone, but I'm going to have it have the same type of angularity of hatching. So like this. So imagine this, there's a ribbon going around your sphere, and you're going to, I'm going to use a 2B. You're going to have your value. The way that you manipulate the application of your graphite strokes, right? Kind of conform around the object. So it's wrapping around. So as you can see here, I'm kind of wrapping this tone around the sphere. So now you have transitional tone, right? But it's also kind of combined with the hatching method, right? So you're combining two modes. And now I'm going to do a little bit of cross hatching maybe. Going against that grain some. So again, I'm just going to try to emphasize that curvature. And you got to excuse me here because I'm actually having quite some difficulty drawing because of the way this camera is set up. It is right in line with where my face is at. And it's just one of those things. I'm just trying to work around it. And it's just something that I'm not... This is not my native drawing stance. Right? I don't have things in my face when I'm drawing. And I'm just going to point that out there. So I'm going to do a little bit of hatching. I'm going to do a little bit of transitional value. Right? And then I'm going to implement the contour lines or contour forms a little bit. And again, I typically don't try to implement one tone specific or one strategy in my drawings. It's usually all of them. It's a multitude. It's not just I'm going to do cross contour or I'm going to do transitional value. It's more like I'm going to do a little bit of both, right? So I'm going to do a little bit of each here because I think it's a little bit more dynamic. So I'm not really an expert at doing transitional value scales in a drawing. I'm not really an expert at creating solely cross contour forms. Kind of like a jack of all trades with regards to drawing. So I know a little bit of everything, but not like I'm not a master of any of it. So I'd have to spend some time playing around to really get adept at this. And I'm doing these drawings kind of at a handicap because it's not like I went and did a study to kind of execute this. And it's just one of those things, right? I'm just kind of going with it and seeing if I'm able to describe it the best of my knowledge. So I'm kind of implementing the transitional value because I think that's going to work better. And then I'm going to see if I can implement a little bit of the modified hatching, a little bit of the cross contour forms here. So as you can see, I'm kind of using those cross contour forms, the hatching method here to kind of create more depth. And I notice what I'm doing wrong is I'm not accounting for the background or reflective light as much as I'd like to. And I think the reason why is because I'm just not as experienced as I like to be on drawing spheres. You know, I don't go home and draw spheres. I draw complete drawings. And even though that you still use some of those basic principles in your final drawings, it's not like they start off from a sphere and they build from there. So I'm looking at this on the screen here, and it's looking okay, but I wish it was a little bit better. I might want to try, see what it looks like with a 6B. Oh, that's going to be a good blooper. Oh, I won't be able to use the 6B now. So this is a kind of a modified version of hatching and cross contour where you're making your hatching marks go with the contour lines of your object. And they're nowhere near as accurate as I'd like them to be, but it is what it is. It's one of those things. You just gotta deal with it and work around it. Again, what happens is, like, I would need to spend 15 minutes per sphere without talking and explaining what I'm doing in order for me to get them where I kind of want them. And that's being generous. That's actually being very minimal. I'd probably have to spend 25 minutes, 30 minutes per sphere to kind of really model them the way that I want them. But I just want you to know that when you take this object, I'm drawing cylinders, like I'm drawing everything bad today. I should have practiced my forms. So I'm doing hatching. I'm doing a cross contour hatching on this. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm making hatching like this because it's going down, and then I'm making a horizontal hatching because it's going across, and then I'm going up with my hatching like this. So I'm making hatch marks that are going across the contour of your form. Now, I don't know what the name of this is. It's just a modified hatching technique. And what that does is create the illusion of volume without using transitional tones so much. Now, another way, my favorite way, because it's more passive, is the last way that, or not the last way, but one of the ways. When I say the last way, that makes it sound like there's only 4 ways to kind of create value in your drawing. No, there's not 4 ways. There's more. There's as many ways as you think is possible. But one of the ways that I like to make value is through it's called the reductive way or subtractive drawing method. So I have this circle here, but I'm probably not going to see it. And I like doing this because it allows you to do less moves, meaning that when you do it this way, you already have a base tone to work from. The other ways, like this, the transitional tone, the hatching, the cross contour hatching / transitional tone hybrid, you are only dealing with one object and you're not even tackling the background yet. When you do these ways, like these styles and techniques, you got to actually apply the background to give it more volume. In this technique where you mass out the whole area with a flat tone, you already have your mid-tone range kind of predetermined in the actual drawing, which is one reason why I like using it. And I personally think using charcoal is a little bit more forgiving than pencil, especially when you get a little bit more experienced with it, because you're able to suggest form as opposed to constantly have to define everything with graphite. When we're drawing with graphite, our knee-jerk response is to constantly go as micro and as detailed as possible. But if we don't know how to be simple and generalize those forms, how can we go so detailed? Okay, so I'm going to try to draw this. What it is you start out with a flat tone like this using your charcoal, vine charcoal stick, and then you're going to, I think I've erased my circle, but we're just going to try to wing it here. So now it's called subtractive or reductive, or or drawing through erasure, where you or erasing your tones out. So even though, and I also find that because you're using vine charcoal, you can get away with a little bit more because the forms are, the lines are softer, and I think they work better with how our eyes see things. Like, our eyes don't always see everything crystal clear. And again, this is not my the main way that I hold my this is not the standard holding position for my charcoal pencil. So I'm just trying to expedite the process a little bit. So all I've done is essentially erased out some of those forms to create the illusion of volume. And I've skipped out a few processes. I should have went a darker tone before, as opposed to doing a mid-tone range, which I kind of started off with. And I think that's because I was trying to rush the process. I mean, I'm trying to keep these videos under 30 minutes, and it just seems that I can't do that. I'd actually have what seems to be apparent or very self-explanatory, you know, isn't as clear as you think it is. So I thought I would be able to explain these ideas and draw them quicker. And it's hard to draw and explain at the same time. You know, really it boils down to, you can do this, but I could draw this, but I'd be very silent. And that's one of the reasons why I don't get a lot of drawings done, or a lot of drawing done or completed when I'm doing demos. And it's because I'm not focusing on whether my main task is not to be able to explain it, you know, because it's not cookie cutter. And there's this notion that it is, you know. What is very clear to me is not necessarily as apparent to someone else, right? So I purposely left open the reflective light, you know. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking my eraser and pulling out those tones a little bit again, right? So what I find with this technique is you can be really kind of sloppy, I guess, be a little more loose, and it feels to me a little bit more forgiving. Now, to someone who's just now starting out and doesn't understand how to do this, it's going to feel very foreign and they're not going to like it. But I happen to think that it works a little bit better because you already have established a mid-tone. And that's one thing that you have to deal with later on. And if you don't have a mid-tone, or even if you don't have a mid-tone, never mind the fact that you don't have that you have the mid-tone established. Guess what? Your background tone, this tone behind your object, is there. It's already set. You don't even have to deal with that anymore. And that's one of the biggest issues with drawing is we only deal with objects, but we don't include the foreground, the background as much as we should. I'm probably applying too much charcoal. I'm pressing a little hard. All right, so that's these are 4 different ways that you can approach applying value, right? You have your transitional tones, slowly adding graphite using hard pencils to soft pencils. You have hatching, which you're using basically lines that are layered on top of each other to create the illusion of form. You have establishing, emphasizing the cross contours of your object to kind of give more of a volumetric approach, or more volume or more form through the cross contours of your object. And then you have reductive, where you mass out the entire background with vine charcoal and then you're basically erasing your forms, and you're pulling your forms out of the paper, right? You're like pulling them out. You're emphasizing those highlights to create the illusion of space, and then you're going back in and applying your charcoal pencil and your vine charcoal to create more believable forms. Now, I like this methodology a little bit more. I was probably going I probably drew this with a little bit too much haste, but that's fine. And so that is that. Those are 4 different ways to kind of use value to your advantage. I hope you learned something through this process and are able to apply it towards some future drawings of yours. Thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful day.